الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. إن شاء الله تعالى we'll start the tafsir of Surah Al-Maarij. Surah Al-Maarij, Surah number 70. We'll start إن شاء الله تعالى with the Surah Al-Maarij, Surah number 70. This is the name of the Surah Al-Maarij, because the word Al-Maarij is mentioned in the Surah, and it's going to be described inshallah ta'ala. It was said to be that the surah revealed right after Surah Al-Haqq. So right after Surah Al-Haqq, the previous one, also it was revealed after it. And it's known by this name, Al-Ma'arij, and also in some of the narrations, Surah Sa'ala Sa'il, which is the first two words in the surah. And the surah, as the like of Surah As-Surah Al-Makkiyah, those who were revealed in Mecca, talks about the matters of belief, the foundation of the deen, talking about the false beliefs upon the disbelievers are upon, and the hereafter, and warning them if they reject the truth that what's waiting for them is the hellfire. And it talks about the believers and some of the characteristics of the believers that are similar to what's mentioned in Surah Al-Mu'minun, and other things and other benefits, inshallah. So we'll start, inshallah ta'ala, with the recitation of Surah Al-Ma'arij. So, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سأل سائل بعذاب واقع. سأل سائل بعذاب واقع. للكافرين ليس له دافع. للكافرين ليس له دافع. من الله ذي المعارج. من الله ذي المعارج. تعرج الملائكة والروح إليه. تعرج الملائكة والروح إليه في يوم. في يوم كان مقداره 50,000 سنة. تعرج الملائكة والروح إليه في يوم كان مقداره 50,000 سنة. فاصبر صبرا جميلا. فاصبر صبرا جميلا. إنهم يرونه بعيدا. ونراه قريبا. So, سأل سائل, the mad here for the 5 counts, and then you have tanween after it ba, and the ruling here is a clap, as you see the small meme, so you make it a meme sound, سأل سائل بعذاب تنوين after it واو. So it's إدغام with غنة. بعذاب واقع. The واو is light and then the قاف is heavy with a kasra. واقع. للكافرين ليس له دافع. And you stop at a سكون. من الله ذي المعارج. The ذال, the tongue outside, and معارج, you stop at the end of the ayah with the jim. There is قلقلة here. ذي المعارج. تعرج الملائكة, to make sure that there's a ضمة on the راء. تعرج الملائكة, the مد. والروح إليه في يوم إخفاء. في يوم كان مقداره, the قاف with سكون قلقلة. مقدا, and the dal is light. The قاف is heavy and the dal is light and then the ra is heavy. مقداره 50,000 سنة. You stop at the هاء. 50,000 سنة. فاصبر. The ra is light and the صاد is heavy. فاص and the fa is light. فاصبر. فاصبر and then you stop at a سكون. فاصبر صبرا, but you don't stop it just because it's سكون. صبرا جميلة. The ba is قلقلة because it has a سكون and then you have إخفاء. صبرا جميلة. إنهم نون الشدة. إنهم يرونه بعيدا ونراه قريبا. Inshallah, we might have a separate session to review the qawaid, the rules of tajweed, or more than one session, inshallah. We're just saying it briefly, assuming that we've been saying it many times. So inshallah, hopefully we can review it, inshallah. The first ayah, سأل سائل بعذاب واقع. The translation for it is a questioner asked concerning a torment about to befall. سأل سائل بعذاب واقع. الإمام السعدي رحمه الله he says, يقول تعالى مبينا لجهل المعاندين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says مبينا to show the ignorance of the stubborn ones. So this is basically refers to what the disbelievers they say. واستعجالهم, and showing their استعجال, their hastening to the punishment of Allah. They ask for the punishment of Allah as a way of mockery, as a way of being in haste because they disbelieve in it. So when the Prophet ﷺ warned them of the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and they don't see it happening immediately in their life because the punishment in the hereafter. So they would ask for it. وَيَسْتَعْجِلُونَكَ بِالْعَذَابِ. They ask you for the punishment to be in haste. وإذ قالوا اللهم إن كان هذا هو الحق من عندك فأمطر علينا حجارة من السماء أو ائتنا بعذاب أليم. They even said, Oh Allah, if this is the truth from you, then pour unto us punishment from you. Or stones from the skies, from the heavens, or a punishment from you. وما كان الله ليعذبهم وأنت فيهم وما كان الله معذبهم وهم يستغفرون. So the two means of security is one of which is the Prophet ﷺ is among them, and the second one is for those who make istighfar. And every nation before the Prophet ﷺ, their destruction was when they refused the message. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed them after the clear signs comes to them from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The final messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not to destroy his ummah with something that would seize all of them. So this is the final message from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but death is near and they see punishments here and there, but not as the nations before. The entire nation is wiped out. So as a result of that, and this is from the ignorance of the disbelievers and asking in hastening of the punishment, استهزاء وتعنتا وتعجيزا. استهزاء, mockery. التعنت is when someone is stubborn and he does not want to be lenient to accept the truth. وتعجيزا, as if they are bringing any challenge or anything of that nature. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most wise. And the evidences and the miraculous things that was presented to them is in such a way, and the punishment is going to happen to them if they continue to be in the state of disbelief. and especially that the punishment was mentioned clearly, meaning in the hereafter. So سأل سائل أي دعا داع. So سأل سائل. السائل is the questioner. سأل is the verb. So سائل here means the doer of the questioner. So the questioner, the questioner. اسمه فاعل. And سأل, this is the verb of it. So he asked, a questioner asked. أي دعا داع واستفتح مستفتح. They're asking to invite the matter, to bring the matter, and asking for it to be upon them as a way of making mockery, and that's the meaning of da'a. واستفتح. استفتح is when someone try to open something, knocking on a door to open it. So they're bringing things upon themselves. So they're asking for the punishment, not they're asking a question to get an answer, for them to know something that they didn't know before. No, they're asking for it. And when someone asks for punishment, they're asking for the act of punishment to be upon them. بعذاب واقع, for a punishment that it befalls them. And this is here سأل سائل. So again, السائل is the questioner, which is the disbelievers. They asked بعذاب واقع. So this is the bit here that makes it the issue of hastening. They're asking for the punishment. And the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala واقع. بعذاب واقع. واقع, that means it's going to befall. But they're asking for it to be sooner. You know, and the Quran is full of warnings against them, that the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is واقع, is going to befall them. It's going to be for them forever. And as mentioned, since the punishment is forever, so they are given, you know, delays and more and more, you know, chances, because the punishment is not just one time and that's the end of it. So this is an everlasting punishment, and it's a person to see the wisdom of Allah. Why the punishment is not coming? Why people are, even the believers, they are asking for the punishment of Allah, or they with the messengers of Allah. متى نصر الله? When is the victory of Allah? The severity of the Day of Judgment, as the many verses in the Quran explains it. First of all, it's very near, it's very close, and the punishment is not any punishment. It's an everlasting punishment for the disbelievers. So it goes exactly according to what is the fact that it's delayed till the Day of Judgment, not an immediate one, and for them to have chances to return to Allah. So again, سأل سائل بعذاب واقع. Who's the questioner? This is the su'al of the kuffar, the disbelievers, and they're asking about a punishment that is going to happen no matter what, so they're asking for it to be sooner. And this is like the ayah in Surah Al-Anfal. And the adhab is the adhab in Jahannam, which is basically the entire punishment in the Day of Judgment. سأل سائل بعذاب واقع للكافرين ليس له دافع. To the disbelievers, translation, upon the disbelievers which none can avert, which none can avert. He says للكافرين. للكافرين. The lam here is, they call it lam al-istihqaq, the deserving lam, if it's correct to say. The deserving letter here is, it's for them. Like this is their punishment. Their punishment is they deserve it. So he says لاستحقاقهم له بكفرهم وعنادهم للكافرين, to the disbelievers. So why? Because they deserve it, because of their kufr, their disbelief, and their stubbornness. ليس له دافع من الله. This is the next ayah. من الله ذي المعارج. That means that no one would avert it, push it away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أي ليس لهذا العذاب الذي استعجل به من استعجل. There is nothing for this adhab, for those who استعجل, for those who are asking for it to be in haste, من متمرد المشركين, from the rebellious among the mushrikeen, because the mushrikeen, the disbelievers, are different levels. So some of them, they act in a rebellious way, they make mockery of the truth, they openly call people to disbelief, versus those who are not doing these types of actions, for example. So as there are levels of al-iman, there are levels of kufr and disbelief. And people would seal their hearts more and more with these evil actions. So those who are asking for it in a mockery way, from the mutamarridi and mushrikeen, the rebellious ones among them, he says, لَيْسَ أَحَدٌ يَدْفَعُهُ قَبْلَ نُزُولِ. No one is able to الدفع is to push away something. So no one is to avert it, no one is to push it away before it comes down. أو يرفعه بعد نزوله. So no one will push it away before it comes down, and no one would lift it up after it's already down. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed for them to be punished, no one can push it away before or after it happens. He says وهذا حين دعا النضر ابن الحارث القرشي أو غيره من المشركين. So here now he mentioned sabab, or a reason why the verse was revealed, that النضر ibn al-Harith al-Qurashi, from the chiefs of Quraysh, or others from the mushrikeen, they said, and he refers to the ayah in Surah Al-Anfal that we just mentioned, when they said اللهم إن كان هذا هو الحق من عندك فأمطر علينا حجارة من السماء وائتنا بعذاب أليم, in Surah Al-Anfal. If this is the truth from you, then pour unto us stones from the skies, or bring the painful punishment upon us. So this is, he mentioned here, Nadr ibn al-Harith. So للكافرين ليس له دافع. And if you connect the verses, سأل سائل بعذاب واقع للكافرين. So the adhab is واقع, and واقع is already established. So وقع is the past tense, something that fell. يقع is a present tense, يقع in the future. But واقع, that means it's already established, it's already befalled upon them. Yeah, so this is how the verse is stating that they're already punished, meaning the fact that they are disbelievers, but the meaning of it that the adhab is already is going to happen. So it doesn't matter if it happens now or it happens after 50 years. It's already happened, meaning the fact that it's going to be established. So واقع للكافرين, to the disbelievers, is prepared for them. And both the Jannah and the Hellfire are created already. They're not going to be created in the future, they're already created already. So no one is able to push that away. Everything is by the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and for people to see that they deserve whatever they would receive in the Day of Judgment. للكافرين ليس له دافع من الله ذي المعارج. من الله ذي المعارج, from Allah, the Lord of the ways of ascent. So min Allah refers to what's previously mentioned, that the adhab is from Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that punishes, not the human beings. And the hellfire is the punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the disbelievers. And that's why even in this life, to burn people, or to burn someone, or to burn even animals as a punishment, this is not permissible. The fire is only by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to punish whoever He will subhanahu wa ta'ala by His justice subhanahu wa ta'ala. So min Allah, from Allah, dhil ma'arij, we'll talk about that, the Lord of the ways of ascent, dhil ma'arij. What does that mean? He says here فالعذاب لابد أن يقع عليهم من الله. The punishment has to befall upon them from Allah. فإما أن يعجل لهم في الدنيا, either it's going to be given to them in this dunya, they taste the punishment in this dunya, in this worldly life, like what happened to the people of Quraysh in the battle of Badr, and then they return to the worst punishment, the everlasting one. So they get both punishment in this life and the punishment in the hereafter. وإما أن يؤخر عنهم إلى الآخرة. And some of them, they won't receive the physical punishment in this life, but it will be delayed for them to the Day of Judgment, and it's the same thing. They will have the everlasting punishment in the hereafter. فلو عرفوا الله تعالى, if they get to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they get to know وعرفوا عظمته, and they get to know the power of Allah and the exaltation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وسعة sultani, and the sultan, the authority and the sovereignty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encompasses everything, وكمال أسمائه وصفاته, and the perfect names and attributes of Allah, لما استعجل, they would never ask for the punishment to be in haste, ولا استسلموا, and they would submit themselves instead, وتأدبوا, and they would have the adab and the manners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to humble themselves. ولهذا أخبر تعالى من عظمته ما يضاد أقوالهم القبيحة فقال ذي المعارج. So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned what opposes their evil statements by saying ذي المعارج, the one that has the ways of ascending to Him. So al-ma'arij, al-mi'raj is the thing that people would climb like a ladder or something like this to get them from one stage to the other. So Al-Ma'arij is Ad-Darajat. Darajat is the levels of ascension, of elevating oneself. So with Ad-Darajat, with the levels of ascension, that means this the highness of someone, the virtue, that's why the Ma'arij, the Fawadil wal Ni'am, as Mujahid and Qatada, they mentioned the Fawadil wal Ni'am, the owner of the Fawadil from Al-Fadl, the owner of virtue, the owner of bounties. It's all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, and you see how the contrast of between saying the punishment from Allah, Dhil Ma'arij, the one that is the owner of levels of virtue, that shows that how evil these disbelievers are upon. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful, and His mercy comes before His anger subhanahu wa ta'ala. And He's the one that has the many different levels to ascend themselves and to attain the levels of virtue. So when someone miss all of this and refuse all of this, and he get himself into the punishment of Allah, and He's the most just subhanahu wa ta'ala, like the same concept of Al-Hasana bi-ashri amthaliha ila 700 ضعف. One deed is multiplied by 10 to 700 to many more multiplications of that. The Hasana, the one good deed. Versus as-sayyi'ah is equal to one sayyi'ah. Only one sayyi'ah. So when someone comes on the Day of Judgment with sayyi'at, with sins that overweight the good deeds, that means he deserves to be punished. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Ma'arij, the matter was very easy for them to save themselves from the punishment of Allah, but they refused, and they are the ones that subjected themselves to the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is Al-Ma'arij or Ad-Darajat, and the owner of these darajat and these levels is by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the punishment is from the one, the owner of the high levels of virtue. من الله ذي المعارج تعرج الملائكة والروح إليه في يوم كان مقداره 50,000 سنة. So the ayah says the angels and the ruh, Jibreel alayhi salam, ascends to him in a day, the measure whereof is 50,000 years. So this is one of the ways of al-ma'arij or al-mi'raj or the ascension. Ta'ruju, this is the verb of it. So al-ma'arij is the plural of al-mi'raj is one, and you know that the night of al-Isra wal-mi'raj. And the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam ascended, this is al-mi'raj, ascended to the heavens. So here now, تعرج الملائكة. The angels تعرج. This is the verb of it, which means they ascend. والروح and the ruh. الروح, when it's mentioned with the angels, refers to Jibreel alayhi salam as it's going to be mentioned. And the ruh is the spirit, but it refers to Jibreel alayhi salam, the best of all angels. إليه, to him, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, he explained here some extensive explanation. We'll go through it inshallah, Tafseer al-Sa'di. He says, أي ذو العلو والجلال والعظمة. ذي المعارج, the owner of al-Ma'arij, the owner of al-Ulu, most high, wal-Jalal. Al-Jalal is one of the ways of explaining exaltation. Excuse me. Wal-Azama, the power of Allah, the exaltation of Allah. Wat-Tadbir لسائر الخلق, and maintaining all of the creation of Allah. الذي, the one, تعرج إليه الملائكة. The angels, they ascend to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. بما دبرها على تدبيره. The angels, they ascend not just like that without any reason, but they come down and they ascend with the good deeds. Major things are happening, and that's why a person should never belittle this life that we live in and the actions that are being done. And when a person does a good deed, and the angels, they meet in Fajr and Asr, and they ascend and they come down, and they ascend to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the good deeds, with recording the actions of the people, and they will be rewarded or punished accordingly. So تعرج الملائكة والروح وتعرج إليه الروح, and the soul ascends to him. So he's, as you will see, the ruh ascends also to Allah when a person dies. This is a fact. And also it refers to Jibreel alayhi salam. But here he says, وَتَعْرُجُ إِلَيْهِ الروح. He says, وَهَذا اسم جنس يشمل الأرواح كلها. الروح here is اسم جنس, the name of the kind. Every soul ascends to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. يشمل الأرواح كلها برها وفاجرة. The righteous of it and the wicked of it. All the souls will be, comes out from the body, ascends to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وهذا عند الوفاة. So this is at the moment of death. فأما الأبرار, as for the أبرار, the righteous ones, فتعرج أرواحهم إلى الله, their souls will be ascended to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فيؤذن لها من سماء إلى سماء. As it's mentioned in other verses in the Quran, in Surah Al-A'raf, for example, and in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, this soul of the believer will be given the permission to enter from one heaven to the other, from one sky to the other. حتى تنتهي إلى السماء التي فيها الله عز وجل. Till it reaches to السماء, the seventh heavens, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His arsh is above all of His creation. Till it reaches its Lord, the soul of the believers will be ascended all the way. فتحيي ربها وتسلم عليه. The soul would greet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as it's mentioned in the hadith, وتحظى بقربه. تحظى, that means it will have the fortune of being close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The souls of the believers, these souls that were purified in this life by the closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with following the commands of Allah, by being obedient to Allah, by believing in Him. وتبتهج بالدنو منهم. تبتهج also refers to al-bahja, is the happiness, is the joy that the souls will receive as a result of being close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they used to be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this life with their actions. So when they die, the souls become close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ويحصل لها منه الثناء والإكرام والبر والإعظام. And as a result of that, these souls will receive from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being praised, الثناء, al-ikram, to be honored and being treated with the generosity of Allah, والبر, and all kinds of righteousness and goodness, والإعظام, from al-azama, it will be exalted and respected, and so on. And the details of that in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, all wahi from Allah. And the matter is great, major, and it's very near, because it's the moment of death. So that shows how, what's the value of this life. It has a great value, but the value of it is for the person to be obedient to Allah, to be close to Allah. Anything other than that is waste. And a person should have his heart attached to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because this is what's waiting for the soul when it departs from the body. This is for the believers. وَأَمَّا أَرْوَاحُ الْفُجَّارِ. And as for the souls of the fujjar, the wicked ones, the evil ones, فَتَعْرُجْ, also is taken out of the body at the moment of death, and it ascends. فإذا وصلت إلى السماء, when it reaches the sama of dunya, as it's mentioned in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, استأذنت, the angels of death, the angels of punishment, they take it, and when it ascends to for the sama, for the first heaven, for them to be taken the permission to enter to the second one, فلم يؤذن له. It will not be given the permission to enter, and وأعيدت إلى الأرض. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in Surah Al-A'raf, that those who deny the truth from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, لا تفتح لهم أبواب السماء ولا يدخلون الجنة حتى يلج الجمل في سم الخياط. The gates of the heavens would not ever be opened for them. So it would not be open for them to ascend more, to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Their concern was this dunya, their concern was this worldly life. They did not seek the rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the hereafter. They did not seek the closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they will be also limited to this worldly life that they were seeking. This is the justice of Allah. So when the souls come out, it does not go beyond this worldly skies or worldly heaven or this worldly life, and it will be thrown back severely to the earth, and the punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be given to it. Then he says, ثم ذكر المسافة التي تعرج إلى الله فيها الملائكة. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the distance where the angels and the souls, they ascend to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وأنها تعرج في يوم بما يسر لها من الأسباب. And it goes up, ascends in a day with whatever means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for it. وأعانها عليه من اللطافة والخفة وسرعة السير. And what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps it from al-latafa, the subtle matters, and the lightness and the height, the high speed. Again, these matters are not to be measured with how we see things in this worldly life. So how can that happens, in such a way when one heaven compared to the next one is like a ring in a desert, and how human beings when they try to travel from one spot to the other, how long it takes them, But when it comes to this, it ascends by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Time is a creation of Allah. So He subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of time. So that means there's no concept of it, of how long is it going to be, what kind of transportation, what kind of this. All of this is the ignorance of the human beings because they're only limited to this limited life that they live in. So he says, معنا تلك المسافة على السير المعتاد, that the ayah gives us that the normal sayr, the normal traveling time for such a distance, it takes 50,000 years. So to them to reach these high levels, it would take them 50,000 years, من ابتداء العروج إلى وصولها ما حد لها. From the time that it start to ascend till the limits of it. وما تنتهي إليه من الملأ الأعلى, till it reaches to the highest level. فهذا 50,000 years. But he did not mention what type of sayr. He did not mention, so that nobody would say, oh, that means if when they're walking or on a camel. This is not our job to get into this, right? So that it's the miqdar of it, the measure of it is 50,000 years if they would go. But it's all by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with no time. So he says, فَهَذَا الْمُلْكُ الْعَظِيمُ. And what needs to be then reflected upon this great mulk and sovereignty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَالْعَالَمِ الْكَبِيرِ, and this universe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created, علوي وسفلي, the high one and the lower one, جميعه قد تولى خلقه وتدبيره جميعه قد تولى خلقه وتدبيره العلي الأعلى. So all of this creation and this universe from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we cannot comprehend the limits of it is all by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala maintaining it. He's the most high subhanahu wa ta'ala. فعلم أحوالهم الظاهرة والباطنة. He knows their physical appearance, their inward ones. وعلم مستقرهم ومستودعهم. He knows where they're coming from. What's the end of their affairs. فأوصلهم من رحمته وبره ورزقه. So when you see this, some of the aspects of this huge universe, what is it then for this human being, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have mercy on him, to know what's in the hearts, what's the intentions. ما عمهم وشملهم وأجرى عليهم حكمه القدري وحكمه الشرعي وحكمه الجزائي. And we'll stop here inshallah, but what covers them and all of that by the power of Allah, His hukm, His the hukm of Allah, the judgment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by His qadr that encompasses everyone, the believers and the disbelievers, and the hukm al-shar'i, as we talked about it before, the religious hukm, what needs to be done versus what's forbidden, and al-hukm al-jazai is the recompense, the punishment or the reward in the hereafter. Because of the time, we'll stop here inshallah, just because this is the first day after having many days off. Otherwise, he's still in this ayah, he mentioned more. So we'll stop here and we'll review what we mentioned about this ayah tomorrow inshallah ta'ala and more. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us benefit from what we heard and to give us this ta'zeem in our hearts to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam, Muhammad wa